We'd like to thank the following sponsors for helping provide this video.
Michael, I'm sure, will tell you about himself, but Michael is one of the people who's responsible for helping me along my Agile journey. Starting 4 or 5 years ago when I first saw Michael and his business partner Lisa speaking locally, reading Lisa's book, taking a coaching stance course from Michael, and most recently having the privilege of participating in his coaching circle related to the book that he's writing and the draft that's now available that was referenced on our meeting. So Michael is all about transformation and change, and I'll leave it up to Michael to tell you more about himself. So Michael Spayd.
Thank you very much. So the first thing I need to do is to ask your indulgence and your, I need to get your agreement to something. I'm writing this book, and the first thing I'll tell you, how many people have written a book in this room? Anybody here considering writing a book? Just one poor soul? So my advice to you is don't write a book. Okay? Don't even attempt to write a book unless you really have to. The latest interesting challenge that I wasn't expecting was some copyright permissions issues, and I currently have a kind of a legal hold from my publisher, so I won't be able to let you take. I will not be able to let you have these slides. You can see them right when you're here. If you have a photographic memory, I guess you could take it down, but I'm going to have to ask you to not take photos of the slides. Will you all be able to agree to that? Anybody have a not okay with that? I'll have to ask you to leave. Because I can't do that. I don't have permission to, right now, to put this material out there. I've actually had to withdraw the excerpt of my book that was on my website. And learning all kind of new things about how copyright works at the discretion of the copyright holder. So I'm sorry for that. It's a pain. I appreciate the Ronald, the videographer, working with me on that. I appreciate you working with me on that. So you all work in an organization, yeah? True? Or you some solopreneurs? This talk is designed and meant for people that are doing enterprise transformation work, for enterprise coaches, for change sponsors. So it might not be relevant to all of you in a punchy kind of way that might be compelling to you, but so I won't be insulted if you leave. But I think it will be of interest to you if you work in an organization, and even if you just work on a team, to understand more what goes on that team, what goes on in your program, what goes on in your department, in your organization, and particularly if you're in a bit bigger company, and particularly if you are really wanting to start an Agile transformation at your organization, I think it will be very helpful to you. The book I'm writing, didn't realize benevolent troublemakers would apply to myself. It's going to be published by Addison Wesley in the Mike Cohn Signature Series. My business partner, Lisa Adkins, wrote a book called Coaching Agile Teams, and so my book echoes that. It's part of what we do is we train Agile coaches, and now we've started to train Agile leaders, because when we go into organizations and when we have success with Agile coaches in helping them see a new mindset and a new way to think about what they do, they say, can you train our leaders to do this? And we brought in a guy that some of you know, Michael Hammond, to do that. So we travel around the world, and right now, actually, I'm on parole leave from a intensive boot camp that I'm part of leading up the street in Essex. And I'm missing the big community event, but I wanted to be able to talk to you all. I missed doing this quite a while ago, year before last, because of weather. I was supposed to be here talking about a similar topic. And you guys had a hurricane or something out here? You guys have hurricanes here, don't you, sometimes? Yeah, maybe. So there's a lot of talk these days about enterprise coaching. It's a very popular topic. It's kind of the next leading edge of where things are going. And I wanted to address, because I'm writing a book on this topic, I wanted to address what it would actually mean to coach an enterprise. Because I think that there's, frankly, a bit of naivete around that topic, a bit of bravado, a bit of misperception around what that would possibly mean. Enterprises are extremely complex systems, collections, and there's three kind of main points I want to talk about. One is, who is the client, or what is the client, in the case of an enterprise. What are the tools you have in kind of a very broad brush sense of what are the tools. And something about who you are if you are trying to be part of catalyzing this kind of a change on an organizational level, even on a program level. So this slide is some of you probably know what this survey is, the Agile State of Agile survey that version 1 does every year. And if you look at the top part of it, you wouldn't know what year you were looking at, whether it was 2006 or 2007 or 2008 or 2009 or 2010 or 2011 or 2012 or 2013 or 2014, because it's been the same every year. Because changing organizational culture and general resistance to change don't change. They're really hard. They have nothing to do with Agile, I'd like to remind us. They're not like scaling or some technical issue or some issue to do with technical practices or even business value. They're to do with people and complex systems and how they do or don't change, how they do or don't respond in the way that we want them to, because they don't, do they? They're often a pain in the arse. So there's all kinds of things, if you think about it, going on in an organization, in a so-called enterprise, like just the structure. Think about how the structure, like who you report to or who reports to who, influences what you can or can't do. It completely changes your worldview, doesn't it? Where you report, who cares about who talks to who regularly, what channels. And then you add in the issue of like politics and how people are trying to get ahead. I mean, everybody is trying to survive in a company. Everybody's trying to become successful in some way, become fulfilled in some way, maybe get what they want, maybe get a promotion, at least not get fired. So that adds a whole nother layer of complexity to where people sit. And then, then we got all these processes, and that creates all this complexity and all this constraint and limitation. And then, it's really not that different from junior high school, is it? Well, they don't like me. Well, I don't like them. So that's like an overlay on top of the process. We're trying to, here's our steps, but does the process work different for if they like you versus if they don't like you? Sometimes, right? And, and then what about leaders? The top leader, that's one thing. That sets a huge constraint or creates a huge open space or possibility at the top, or a big constraint, and then, all his or her directs, and then those people down, so that's a whole kind of thing that's going on. And then there's a thing that we call culture, which is somewhat of a mashup of all these things, or a stylistic thing. And it's a big, there's a lot of noise. There's a lot of things going on. And if we're going to coach an enterprise, holy cow, that's a lot of things to keep in mind, right? When we sat down to, Lisa and I have worked with the International Consortium for Agile to define what does it mean to coach it all. What are the kind of skill sets that you need? What are the competencies? What do you need to know? We did that at the team facilitator and the Agile coach level, and then we started doing it at the enterprise coach level. And whoa, that's quite a few things. I mean, just look at some of those things. Understanding how leaders develop, ethical considerations, frameworks for scaling, educating at an organizational level, understanding a change strategy. There's a lot of things that people write dissertations on some of these topics. So it's no small feat to even think about, you know, and this is kind of the, like a big high level sense of what, you know, people, a panel of experts, so-called, I'm one of them, I mean, come on, but thought people need to know. That's a reflection of the complexity that there is in an organizational system. So, what I've been trying to write this book for, let's see, about 7 years. And I'm a collector of models. I love different models. I love, and I've collected some really brilliant ones, I think, that have a lot of power to them. You may know the quote, all models are wrong, but some models are useful. And I've collected a lot of very useful models, and I always wanted to try to put them together into one piece, into one package, because, you know, having a big collection of models is just not that interesting or not that useful. It would be much more useful if they all somehow integrated together, wouldn't it? If they were all somehow one thing. And it's a little bit like, if you know anything about physics, and I know very little about physics, but I get the aesthetic of physics. And one of the holy grails in physics is called the unified field theory. How do you put together all the forces, gravitational force, electromagnetic force, weak force? How do you make those all, because they all work independently, they contradict each other. And like, how could we make those all, you know, work together? And I've been longing for something like that in the organizational space. And I think I found it. I didn't create it. I'm merely applying it. And it to really use it requires an upgrade to our operating system. And it's called the integral operating system. There's actually a movement in the world called the integral movement, the integral model, the integral theory, integral operating system. That's sort of like, sort of like the Agile movement. It's got hundreds of practitioners. It's probably not as big as the Agile movement, but it's got more. It's got a higher density concentration of thought leaders and movers and shakers in the world that practice it. It was started by a man named Ken Wilber. And what integral means is that possessing everything essential or significant, that it's complete, that it's whole. So that's, you know, this idea of my unified theory of organizations. An integral approach incorporates all the essential perspectives, schools of thought, and methods into a unified, comprehensive, and accurate framework. So that's what I was looking for, is not something that, something a meta map, really. Something that allowed a space for all the models, because, you know, any model that we use, any framework that we use has some intelligence to it, else we wouldn't use it, right? It would get wiped out very quickly. People are smart, with certain limitations. So what I was looking for was what Oliver Wendell Holmes said. He said, I wouldn't give a whit for the simplicity that's on this side of complexity, but I would give my life for the simplicity that's on the other side of complexity. And for me, at least, that's what this is. This is the simplicity on the other side of complexity. It doesn't reduce the world to, meaningless, little neuronal, I mean, so a reductionistic science thinks that, us seeing beauty or falling in love can be reduced to chemicals in our brain. Well, that's nonsense. That's a correlate. It's not what it really is. That's what happens in a certain aspect. So interesting, but not the whole picture. And that's what this integral model does, is helps us see the whole picture. See the chemical reactions as perfectly valid, and see falling in love as perfectly valid. So, you remember that moment in The Matrix. This is your chance to leave. The blue pill is going out the door right now, because you might not see the world the same after you, if you really give yourself to this presentation, you might not see the world the same after you hear it. You might be, I've done this presentation quite a few times, I've done it to hundreds of people, and I didn't, this was not my idea, this was their idea. You could be a little depressed after this. But I'm only offering you the truth, nothing more, from my point of view. All right, anybody? No harm, no foul. Okay, so let's look at the enterprise client. So one thing that's going on is that there's a bunch of individuals, and individuals have all kinds of psychology. Think about all the variations of the Myers-Briggs. I mean, there's 16 different types altogether. Or think about DISC, maybe if you know DISC. There's 4 basic types, but then there's every combination of primary and sub. There's lots of different ways that you can think about people, and people are pretty different, pretty complex. And then if you go to think about teams, teams are different than individuals. Teams have their own logic, they have their own spirit, they have something else going on, don't they? It's not the same as just a collection of individuals, it's a different thing. And then you have that interacting with the individuals, and who's your client? Who are you focused on? Those individuals? 5 of those individuals? All 10 people on that team? The team itself? Those individuals individually? And gosh, what if they're part of a department or a program? Now we're talking about 10 teams. We're talking about 150 people. That's a different dynamic. That's a tribal dynamic that's different than a team dynamic, right? And if you go to an organization level, whoa. And who's your client? Who are you good at? My partner Lisa is really good at the individual level. I'm much better at the team level, actually. I sense and know how to work with teams and systems. That's just really, I'm really good at doing that. That's who my client, that's my ideal client probably. Departments, that's a little bit harder. I like that space, but I don't know that I'm really great at that program department level. Piece of the puzzle is where you put your focus, where we put our focus in terms of who our client is if we're trying to coach an enterprise. Or if we're trying to do anything, if we're trying to change something, if we're trying to have something stick, have a methodology stick. Okay, so we're going back to developmental psychology in college. How many people took developmental psychology? Anybody? Anybody study Piaget?
Yeah. Putting my hand up, sorry.
You got to be old to study Piaget, just saying.
Yeah.
I'm speaking as one. So there's a long tradition, starting with Piaget in developmental psychology, and Piaget did things like this just to give you a sense of this field. It's extremely important for us to understand what's going on in an organization. If you don't understand what's going on in this level, you are going to miss why there's so much conflict or why people don't get at things the same way. So one of the experiments that Piaget did was he had 2 beakers that were exactly the same dimensions. They looked the same shape and everything, and they both had colored liquid in it. It filled up to exactly the same height, right? And you put that in front of a 3 or 4-year-old, and then you add another beaker that's long and thin, okay? and you take one of those beakers that's clearly the same amount, and you put it in this big tall beaker. The liquid doesn't go anywhere, it goes. What do you think? A 4-year-old thinks. Which has more liquid? The tall one, because it's taller, right? Now, do you think that? No, and neither does a 9-year-old. But a 4-year-old does, because they haven't, their cognitive structure hasn't developed what's called permanence of matter. They don't understand that it couldn't have just disappeared, that it couldn't be actually more because it was clearly equal, you know, but it looks more. So that's a developmental shift that happens in children. And people used to think that that was the limit of it, that it didn't go any further than children. And when you got to Piaget studied his own children, by the way. Not like B.F. Skinner, if you know about that. Not like putting people in boxes and that kind of crap. But he was much more humane. He was Swiss French. But he studied in detail his kids. It was really fascinating stuff. And he thought it stopped at adolescence with something called formal operations, the ability to actually do logic and do different permutations of stuff, do what if scenarios. And he studied mainly cognitive development. What people have discovered since then is that it goes way past that, and we develop into adulthood. Some people have probably seen Bill Joyner here, right? You've
Yes.
seen Bill Joyner, Leadership
Sure,
Agility
yep.
here?
Mhm.
Bill Joyner is one of those people. He studied with Bill Torbert. There's a lot of people at Harvard, Robert Keegan, who do work in this area. And what they have realized, one is that development continues on into adulthood, potentially indefinitely. Larry Kohlberg. Gosh, you had a lot of people at Harvard, actually, that are big in this field. Carol Gilligan. Carol Gilligan's at Harvard, didn't she? She was. Anyway, there's another guy named Claire Graves who did some really interesting work, and this other guy is Ken Wilber, who did a lot of synthesis. He's the founder of the integral model. And what he discovered, he did this by having his students over the course of a whole semester write about what was it that made a mature person. And they did this over the course of like about a month, just wrote an essay about it, and then for another month they had it critiqued and they had to revise it, based on peer or professor critique. They didn't have to change it, but they had to react to that. They spent a long time. It was the whole semester project, basically. And then he took all those written conceptions of what does it mean to be a mature person, and he gave it to a group of judges that didn't know anything about the students or the experiment, and he said, what's the commonalities? Can you put these into groups? And sure enough, they could. And there was about 7 or 8 judges, and which is quite a lot, actually. A lot of this kind of research has 3 or 4 judges to do expert judgment. They put them into 5 different groups, and then he did that another year, and different set of judges, different set of 8 judges, and new set of students. He gave them the new set of students ideas about mature persons, and he gave them the old ones. He said, can you put these into groups? Yep, they could. And they were unanimous. They all agreed on, they didn't agree like for a name of the group or anything else about it, but yeah, this is similar. These are the same kind of things, these are the same kind of things, these are the same kind of things. And he did that not twice, he did that 9 times. Different judges every single year. All the conception, they always agreed. Now that's like, that doesn't happen in this kind of research if you I studied psychology, graduate or BA and MA. It just doesn't happen that there's that much consistency. And what he eventually discovered, he didn't have a theory. He was just trying to answer his students' questions because he taught personality, And the student asked him a very annoying question, so which one is the right one? I don't know. So he took this long, massive study to find that out. And he found that people develop what he called personality systems in a way that was emergent, that changed over time according to what one's life circumstances led one to need to do. So in other words, it's sort of just an evolutionary theory that your life circumstances force you to create a personality system, and when your life circumstances evolve or change or grow, you need to form it, and the personality system no longer works, you need to form a new one. And that's a common pattern that human beings go through, and this is completely consistent. Not everybody, it's like, it's a little bit like Celsius and Fahrenheit. They don't agree with where exactly the numbers line up, but come on, it's 212 or 100, it's 0 or 32. It doesn't really matter, right? It's still the same progression, it's still the same, water still boils, water still becomes ice. It's the same kind of thing. All these researchers agree you don't skip developmental stages. You don't. You have to go through them all. You might stop at any place and just stay there, and that will be fine. But you can keep going. You don't skip around. It's not arbitrary. In Graves' work, he found that 60% of people were more or less centered in a given personality system or a given stage of development, and about 40% were in transition from one to the next. That seems fairly reasonable, doesn't it? And he also found that that there was a psychology that was suitable to that stage of development in terms of education, in terms of training, in terms of coaching. For him it was psychotherapy back then in the 70s. In terms of management, even your physiology changes, as you mature. And that people will respond well if you've got the right approach to the stage of development that they're at, and they will reject you if you're coming from a different stage of development, if your approach is suitable to a different stage of development. Well, that makes sense too, right? I mean, you've got to be consistent with the thinking, the kind of psycho-emotional structure they have. So this is, Claire Graves I've been talking about, Suzanne Cook-Greuter, Bob Keegan, Gene Gebser, Bill Torbert, all found basically the same thing. Again, they don't draw the lines in exactly the same place, but they all have a progression. Adults go through them in a sequence. So here's the kind of a summary of what they found. This first one is called impulsive or red. Red is a color scheme that's fairly arbitrary. We use it in the integral world. It aligns with the colors of the rainbow, and it's arbitrary. It's a useful mnemonic because it helps you remember them at some point. People that are at red, and this is basically the level of about a 3-year-old, but 10,000 years ago, it was the level of an adult. It was the level of a fully mature adult, was like a 3-year-old is today, in terms of that it was about power and dominance. It was about having a kingdom. It was about avoiding shame for somebody being stronger than you or taking things over from you, taking stuff away from you. It's where the ego fully forms, and so we become aware of death. Before that, tribal cultures, people that believed that we had to sacrifice people because the gods are mad at us, and we're gonna be killed if we don't sacrifice somebody. They didn't really have a sense of separate self. More like a 1.5-year-old or 2-year-old, magical thinking. The world, when I move, the moon moves. That's what a 1.5, 2-year-old thinks, and that's what truly tribal peoples thought. So red is a progression. Red is a development up from that. It's a good thing, but it's actually not all that adaptive in modern companies. You might think your bosses did kind of this way, but probably not as a fundamental, probably not where they're fundamentally centered. The next place up, developmental place that people, and this arose about 4,000 years ago with the rise of Judeo-Christianity. On a cultural level, it's belief in an absolute truth. Belief in an absolute truth that your version of the truth from your God or from your authority is completely superior, and everybody else is going to hell. In a purely cognitive sense, like Bob Keegan would say, it's where you start to become aware of social roles and social expectations, where you follow authority figures. It's, for most children in Western modernized, industrialized places, it's probably about 8 or 10 or maybe 12. But some people don't move beyond that. Some people don't, on a primary level, they might in certain kind of cognitive ways, but they don't fundamentally move beyond that. And they have an absolutist, it's what a lot of the jihadist, extremist, whatever persuasion, whatever religion, it's that kind of mentality. And it's the mentality of some companies, and it's the mentality of, bureaucracy, a truly hidebound bureaucracy, some government agencies. And when Graves studied these people, he both got the conception that they were, that they had done, and they didn't know anything about this, but he did, and he had them in subsequent years, and he put them together into groups so that he could study how do they work together. So he put all the Amber people together into a group, or to multiple groups, because he did this for 10 years. And he found that they always formed themselves into at least 2 hierarchies, and that the top of the hierarchy could argue with each other, where the middle could or the bottom could, but not, you didn't do this. People didn't go above their status level, right? It's a little bit like a caste system. Okay, so the next place that we can develop to, I should say that each one of these systems of thinking has strong points, and there was definitely a progression over the place that came before, and is and still, they never go away. They don't. It's not like we completely leave behind these things. This is Amber is the place where we follow rules, where the police and the military enforce Amber rules and regulations. That that's what helps us have a society. Is that there's some level of that. That's what broke down in the Great Recession. Is some level of healthy Amber regulation that completely collapsed, and the economy collapsed. An interesting book called Memenomics that addresses that topic. Achievement Orange is very pragmatic and success oriented, and now you're starting to see more complex logic, more what-if logic cognitively, and where Amber was subservient to authority, and I've got to fulfill my social role and I can't really go outside it. This is where Bob Keegan, it starts to become the part of what Bob Keegan calls self-authoring. So I'm authoring my own experience. I'm the master of my own destiny. I define my goals. I define what success is for me. Now, hopefully, you're starting to see the connection. This is not just. I'm not taking you here just to give you a psychology lesson. There's some pertinence. I hope you're starting to see it, or you're starting to think about, how does this apply in the organization that I work in? And how does it apply to Agile Ideas? And have I seen the place that Agile Ideas comes from yet? Maybe, maybe not. So Orange will question authority, and it values having freedom to pursue goals. So Tony Robbins is is, you know, a great example of this kind of thinking. You know, success-oriented, get ahead, get the most from yourself. You can probably see that this sort of matches with Maslow's hierarchy of needs in a certain way. Okay, so Orange came about historically. So in developmental psychology, I learned this really cool phrase that blows their minds because they don't know these terms. Ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny. Anybody know what that means? It means the history of the the species moving, you know, over time, evolving over time, is paralleled by the history of an individual. Okay, so we as individual people develop in a parallel path to how the species developed from a psychological point of view. Makes sense, right? We have to go through the same kind of social, you know, cognitive, emotional structures. So Orange arose about the time of the French and American Revolution, and you know, in fact, America had the Bostonians had many of the cutting-edge thinkers of the time who were you know, and estimates are maybe 10% of the population was thinking at Orange. 10% is enough for a critical mass to change, you know, a system, to change a whole society. So pluralistic green didn't come about till maybe about 120 years ago. I mean, it was probably there, you know, in very limited number of individuals, but it wasn't enough to be seen historically until about 120 years ago. And pluralistic green loves fairness and community and equality of all perspectives, and it's where political correctness comes from. It's where diversity training comes from. It values relationship over outcomes. And it loves consensus. It believes that every perspective, the pluralism is every perspective is valid. Who am I to say that, you know, my perspective is more important or better than yours? So what's common between these, Graves studied, you know, were these people different with the different conceptions? Were they different in IQ? What do you think? No. They had normal distributions of IQ. Were they different in any number of other personality characteristics? No, not most. They were in a few, so Amber is much more dogmatic than anybody else. They have a wave-like function in terms of conflict. I don't remember where I was going with that. Must not have been that important. It'll come back. Oh, I know. What is the case between levels is that the level of complexity of the person goes up. So pluralism is a more complex form of cognitive structure and value structure than is Orange success orientation. It's got its limits, it's got its problems, but it's more complex. So starting to see companies you know, starting to see people you know, starting to resonate your own value. You know, look for where you resonate. Look for where you think, well, gosh, that's just the way it is. Where you start to think, gosh, that's just the way it is, that's probably the lens you're looking through. Right. Okay, one more thing that Graves found, he didn't call it this, evolutionary teal. This is a integral perspective on it. So at teal, we start to focus on inner integrity. You can see the jump from orange, where let's retrace back what Graves found with the people at Orange when he organized them into groups. The people at Amber, remember, organized into hierarchies. The people at Orange, they fought for control. They fought for dominance. They fought to be the leader. Really competitive until one person prevailed, and then that person fought and controlled people to keep control. Kind of sort of vicious, a little bit cutthroat. It was actually very cutthroat. At Green, everybody got together and they wanted to hear each other, and they sat around in a circle, and you know, they couldn't get started. They couldn't do anything because nobody wanted to insult anybody and take over leadership. They all had to listen to each other and, try to reach consensus, and, they didn't want to make any move until everybody had been totally heard and was totally happy. Teal, they debated ideas. They were really excited about, bringing their idea forward, but they didn't put the person down. There was never an ad hominem attack in Teal. They debated ideas. And whoever had the best idea from the point of view of the group became the leader. And then if that dissolved or that issue was done, then a new issue would come up and somebody else might have an idea, and so that person would become the leader. And he called that the rotating leadership group because they rotated their leadership. You have a quick question?
Yeah, would you call that more of a meritocracy?
Yeah, maybe so. Yeah, maybe so. At Teal, people become purpose-driven. They're driven by their purpose in life. That's what's important to them. Okay, so hopefully you're starting to, this is what the whole stack looks like. There's actually one below this called beige or infrared. This goes back, this is the magenta is the integral name. I haven't had time to make my own chart for this. Goes back way into prehistory. So that's a sense, and I haven't talked about turquoise, and I probably won't. Okay, so now let's start looking at using this framework to look at organizations. So a typical orange organization, and probably you can get that most organizations are organized in an orange way. That's the fundamental, Western system value structure. Not true in Scandinavia. Scandinavia is pretty green. But most of Western Europe and the US is decidedly orange as kind of a center of gravity. Definitely a fair amount of green, fair amount of amber, but a center of gravity of orange. So that's what an orange organization does is they have a hierarchical pyramid that's usually sort of functional, matrixed, right? They have heavy project management methods, and interviews are done by HR and so forth. And we have to have a job description, and we have to focus on individual appraisal and so forth. So what would a Teal organization do? Well, a man named Frederick Laloux studied that just recently. A book came out this year. Highly recommend this book, Reinventing Organizations. You're going to like the description of these companies, but there aren't very many of them. You're going to have to fight for positions if you want one. Here's what he found Teal organizations did. And these organizations were not, like little tiny, 50-person organizations or 10-person organizations. His criteria was that they had to be in business for 5 years or more, and they had to be at least 100 people. And he found some that were much more than 10,000. He found a number that were hundreds and several that were thousands of people, and some that were over 10,000. So here's what they did. Now, I want to caution you, these are not organizations that are using Agile software development. That is, he's not connected to Agile. So the first thing was they have self-organizing teams, and they have coaches with no management authority. Anybody heard of that? Heard of something like that? They didn't have project managers. People self-staffed projects in Teal organizations. And, we don't need HR to interview team members. We'll do it ourselves, thanks. They're going to work with us, so why wouldn't we do that? And, job titles, we don't really need that. It's not really that important. And, why don't we appraise people? Because managers really don't really work with the people day to day. We do. And, we'll just agree with our peers when we want to change our role, because that's who depends on us. So, that's looking an awful lot like what some people espouse, don't you think? But it's, well, Okay, so you ready for the bad news? Here's what the distribution looks like in the Western population, about. You maybe won't be surprised, but you might be disappointed. Now, are you getting a sense of what kind of idea you think Agile is? Like what level of thinking? Yeah? Any other thoughts?
I don't think it's quite teal, it's more greenish.
Yeah, I think personally, I think it's green teal. I mean, I think there's elements of both. But it's not an orange idea. Certainly not an amber idea. So we're going to go through the Agile, we're going to go through each of these, like what would Agile look like at each value level? Tradition-driven, results-driven, people-driven, and adaptive. So at amber, in an amber organization, now it's a gross oversimplification to say an amber organization, because there's probably no such thing. The people in any given organization are probably reasonably distributed like that graph I just showed. And but there's clearly a center of gravity of most organizations, and maybe they span two levels, but probably one 50% and the other 35%, and then the distribution goes on like that, something like that. And in amber, you'll see that the Agile Manifesto is kind of reversed. They really do believe that comprehensive documentation is more important than working software. That is, because, think about it, if you believe in a single authority could actually have some line to the truth, well then whoever created that documentation and that process is actually smarter than anybody else in the company, and so you really should be. I mean, if you believe that your God is really the only God and everybody else is going to hell, and everybody else, if they try to convince somebody of the validity of their religion, they are the devil. They are evil. And you can see that it might be, right to stop them. Can you take that perspective? It's kind of scary, but it's also, by the logic of that way of thinking, it makes sense. It makes a lot of sense. So, I don't recommend in an amber organization that you would use Agile, because I think there's too big of a disconnect. You'll go through the motions. You might have, Agile by edict, because if the authority says, we're going Agile, then yes, sir, we will, right away. But the disconnect of thinking is too great. Now, a limited form of Kanban, yeah, that might work. Because if all we're doing is measuring cycle time and having whip constraints, we're not going to get into big scale, actually looking at the whole value stream and, changing it in massive ways. But could we do a limited form of Kanban? Yeah, probably so. But I don't think that you can do Agile in an amber organization. If you have one, you might not have one. Now, in orange and results-driven Agile, could you, orange is going to love saving money. It's going to love it. It's going to be music to its ears. It's going to love you getting good results. It's going to love you decreasing cycle time if it means things get to market faster and they make more money faster. So you see a lot of orange organizations adopting Agile because of the pragmatic, tactical, cost-oriented benefits. Where orange will draw the line is it's not going to be so interested in your touchy-feely, consensus-driven, empowerment to the people kind of hoo-ha. It might let you do that, but only if you get results, only as long as you get results. And I think some of you know that tension of, you want to go to this kind of more inclusive kind of a place, but the machine, and orange sees the company, the organization as a machine. Green sees the organization as a family, right? So, so Orange is very consistent with, they love working software over comprehensive documentation. Yapamo over that. Contract negotiation over customer, customer collaboration would be nice, but yeah, really we gotta, this is a business after all. Right? That's an Orange way of thinking. Nothing wrong with that. At Green, you can start to see, well, we focus on people and the underlying values and really empower teams. Woohoo! Green is going to love this stuff. Green is going to love having a flat organization. That's what Green does. They don't like hierarchies. They don't like having power over other people. So there's going to be a good fit. One of the problems is that there's not many Green for-profit businesses. Most Green organizations manifest in the not-for-profit world because it's consistent with the value system. Ben & Jerry's, Southwest Airlines being notable exceptions of probably Green companies. Now at Teal, I call it adaptive Agile because it's where you can do the whole shoot and match, because Teal starts to see things systemically. They want rotating leadership. They don't want hierarchy. A company like W.L. Gore, who makes Gore-Tex, they haven't had managers for 50 years. Nobody can tell anybody what to do. They don't, that's not how they're organized. You're going to be able to do Agile there, probably completely, in some idyllic sense. Okay, so that took quite a while. Hopefully we locked in, that this is what I think is happening in organizations is that Agile as a Green Teal idea becomes an attractor, a chaos attractor for all the people that are Green and Teal that want to, we want to do that. It resonates with our values, right? It resonates with who we are. And then that creates this culture war backlash with the rest of the company that's often Orange, that actually is not so down with, those values. And that's the tension that a lot of people feel in their organizations. This is just a little sense of how things change. They usually go into disequilibrium first, and which causes you to do more of the same, typically. And it may go into a dysfunctional state, or you may go into a resolving state. There's a lot of complexity to change, and when people move through, when an individual, let's talk about an individual first, moves through these stages, it takes them about 5 years to do that. The accelerated path between stages is maybe 2 years. And research says that the most known effective way to move through stages, vertical learning, is meditation. And I can, if that's of interest to you, I can get into why that's true at a subsequent point. But companies, organizations, especially bigger organizations, are very, very unlikely to move hardly at all, maybe at all. Certainly they would move extremely slowly, because you've got just so much going on that, and the thing that Lalu found, the reinventing organizations, was that the very senior management was the constraint on where, so he found no Teal organizations that didn't have a Teal CEO and a Teal board, right? Makes sense. It's not going to happen if, it doesn't guarantee it, but it constrains, what's possible. Okay. So let's look at, so that's about your client. You've got to know where their cultural value is and what's important to them. And if you're going to reach them, you've got to talk the language and the value system that makes sense to them. So if you're working in Orange, you've got to talk the language of results. You've got to talk the language of success. You're not going to be successful in Orange if you don't talk and really respond to that language, even if you've got your own thing going on with all this Green Teal Agile stuff. So this is a conceptual organizing system for anything, really. It's called the 4 quadrants in interval theory. And it's basically 4 different perspectives that we can take on anything. It's as simple as first, second, and third person. So it's really fundamental. Wilbur figured this out when he was studying hundreds of thought systems. He's probably studied more thought systems than anybody in the history of the world. He's like this unbelievable both writer and reader. He just reads everything. He's written more than 20 books. He just churns them out. He holds up in his loft for years at a time and studies it like a monk and comes out with these things. And he had 200 legal pads all over his loft when he was writing one of his major books. And he suddenly had this epiphany. Oh my God, I get how they're all organized. They're organized in one of these ways. It's either I or we or it or it's. That's the bias that they have, that they have some kind of a belief in a certain kind of a way of thinking is the only way that really makes sense. So you can take a psychological perspective or a behavioral or a practices perspective on the individual level, or you can take a cultural perspective, or you can take a systems perspective. Subjective, objective, individual, collective. And if you play this out in terms of methods, I methods are like working on EQ or developing leadership, or a personality profile tends to measure the I space. Introspection and reflection, that's an I methodology. For understanding my first person perspective, what I think, what I feel, what's important to me, how I view the world. Excuse me. From an it perspective, we have the scientific method. It's an objective measuring surfaces of things as opposed to depth. We have metrics and observation. Think about productivity. Is one of those the right method? No. They both have their purposes. They both have their value. They're both, to be integral, we have to look from both perspectives, or we're going to be missing something. Same thing on the plural level. We could examine our mental models. We could have a dialogue process where we try to understand each other in a deep way. We could have a cultural design process, about our shared relationship. In the ITS window, we have a systems thinking or a portfolio analysis or trends, or looking at a value stream map. I'm trained in something called relationship systems coaching, which is a very we-oriented methodology which helps a system see itself from sort of an experiential point of view. What's it like to be on a team that just, had their product go down the tubes? There's a way we do things. People that have been in our class know we do something called constellations, which is a way to visualize a human system, a relationship system. Just like on the other side, that's a we orientation. Just like on the other side, Kanban is a way to visualize a workflow system, an objective, it's oriented, something that everybody can see. The other thing is something that people feel, but something people intuit. People know it internally. They don't know it from they don't measure it so much. In the Agile world, we have, on the one hand, we have being Agile. Being Agile is a mindset kind of a thing, right? It's not doing Agile is over on the other side here. Software craftsmanship, there's the level of pride. I have pride of authorship. That's what drives me to engage in software craftsman behaviors. That's different than what's the practices, what's the behavior I engage in. The professional coaching is an I kind of a method. Leadership agility focuses on I. Kanban, the scientific method, focuses on it. And the thing about these is that we tend to have a bias toward one of these. We believe that one of them is the truth, that one of them is the only way. Fill in this sentence for yourself. if only blank, or Agile would be great at our organization if only blank. My business partner Lisa fills that in with, if only leaders would evolve. That's an I perspective. I would be more inclined to say, Agile would be great for our organization if only the culture would evolve. That's a we perspective, right? To be integral, to actually have a complete system, we have to take all four perspectives. So, you know, like over in the ITS side, you know, we have something like beyond budgeting or systems thinking or SAFE. SAFE, Scaled Agile Framework, is a decidedly ITS way of thinking about an organization. It's not, it knows that culture and leadership are important, but it doesn't have a methodology for doing anything with that. Not like executive coaching is a methodology for actually growing a leader into a higher level of functioning, where they can actually be different. Okay, so different tools are appropriate for different circumstances. We each have a bias. We each have our limitations. You know, I'm a very we-oriented person, followed by I. It is like this blind spot. I don't, I can appreciate that it's important, but like, don't ask me to just, you know, it's, yeah, I can kind of get the aesthetic of that. I like systems thinking. I can see that, but I'm more of a we systems thinker, more than an it systems thinker. You might see where your own bias is. But if you're going to actually work with an enterprise transformation, you can't afford to leave one of those on the table and think that, you know, SAFE is going to do the whole thing. It ain't. But neither is, you know, professional coaching. Neither is, you know, just a culture approach. None of those are going to do the whole trick. So this is the complete kind of meta map. So there's, you know, where is, you know, a tool or a client from an altitude point of view, from an amber, orange, green, teal. And then what quadrant does it address? I, we, it, or its. And the fact that there's that things evolve over time from lesser to greater complexity. So these are my names for each of those quadrants in an enterprise context. The architecture of the environment, the culture, the leadership, the products and technologies and competencies that we have. And if we're going to actually transform an enterprise, we have to address all four of those things, and you're never going to find that in one person that they're actually able to competently deal with all those things. You have to have a team, and a complementary team with different kind of skill sets to be able to do that. This is a brief application from management of, I'm not going to talk about this in any detail, but in the leadership and engagement. So if I'm a manager trying to work with this integral operating system, I'm going to think about, in the I space, I need to be a coach leader in some way. I need to be able to take somebody's first-person perspective and help them find their first-person perspective, because that's where I'll find their motivation. That's where I'll help them be clear on their, you know, how they fulfill their goals. And in the it space, I need to be a business leader or a process leader. I need to understand, you know, the importance of technical practices, for instance, and what difference that makes, what technical debt is about. That's a very different kind of perspective. In the it space, I need to be a systems leader. I need to understand or find people that do understand how systemic effects work on my organization. And in the we space, I need to be a facilitative leader, because I need to be able to create conversation or host a conversation between people so that we can see what our shared vision is together. We can create inspiration together and alignment between us. So this is a little matrix to look at different kind of tools that are used and what quadrant they live in and what level they correspond to. Because remember what Claire Graves said, if you choose an approach that's inappropriate to that level of development, it won't be heard, it won't be taken in, it will be resisted actually. It'll be counterproductive. So I'm not going to talk about that, I don't think. If I think about the it space, that would be engineering practices, and Orange is going to love getting better at engineering practices. That's a resume builder. That's a competency-oriented thing. So that's going to resonate with, and Orange tends to be more quadrant-oriented. It doesn't care as much about, and you can see that Orange doesn't care as much about the I and we quadrants. It cares about the objective outside space. It's where the scientific method first came up, was in that place. So that's going to be a good match. Conversely, in the organization architecture space, a flat organization, if you preach a flat organization, that's not going to go anywhere in an Orange company, or with an Orange client, or with an Orange leader. In a green one, it is. Now, you might not know that ahead of time, so you're going to have to float some trial balloons if you're trying to. And what I'm suggesting is that you don't put yourself on that trial balloon and get lost over the Sahara or shot down, if you see what I mean. You want to just launch that trial balloon and see what happens. And the way that it's responded to by a given leader or by a given client will give you a diagnosis of where they're at. Because what makes sense at that level will be what resonates with them. That'll be what they take. We have, I think, quite a lot of ambition for our clients sometimes about we want to move them all to teal. We want to transform their cultures. And that's just not going to happen. That doesn't mean we can't do some good, but policies on rights of workers, a very green kind of idea. This is just, if you know the leadership agility set, this is in the expert achiever kind of range, and this is in the achiever catalyst kind of range, and this is decidedly catalyst. So in an inappropriate client to be talking about they should be a catalyst leader is just ridiculous. It's not, you might float that idea out there and see if they just change the subject. Okay, well, that tells me something. So that's some sense of, that there's a, you're not going to be able to read all that. The idea is that for different levels, for different quadrants, there's appropriate tools. And to take the band that's appropriate to the client that you have, and by seeing what resonates, what speaks to them, let me keep going. So here's the most important part for me, is for us to know ourselves. Because we have a lot of, in the positions that we're in with change, we have a lot of power because people really want what they think we have, and we sometimes have the ability to give it to them, we sometimes don't. And we're in great danger of doing harm if we try to foist on them inappropriate tools. So for instance, I don't know if you know this thing, holacracy. Holacracy is a very popular, it's a very consistent with Agile way of governing. It's really cool, and Zappos is implementing it right now. But it's not a good idea for an Orange organization. It's just not going to happen. That an Orange organization is going to give away their power and arrange themselves. It's where we can really, I think, do harm and be inappropriate, not meet our clients where they are. So one piece of knowing yourself is knowing what quadrant you're good at, what quadrant you're biased to, and see if you can expand your range into at least appreciation. You might not be able to go to competence. I will probably never be competent at it, but I can have a sensitivity to it. I certainly know that it's important. I recognize people that are good at it and have an appreciation of them. And then, what's our motivation? What are we trying to do? What is it that drives us? Are we really trying to serve people, or are we trying to get them to be like us? Or are we trying to create organizations that we actually want to work in? I dare say that some of you ought to band together with some other of you and start your own organizations. Because the ones that you're working in are probably not going to evolve fast enough for you. It's a good networking place to start. So here's the bottom line. Really think through who your client is, who you're trying to approach, and what approach will be useful for them. Getting a span of tools that address all the quadrants, and getting a sense of what is my motivation and how can I at least do no harm. The thing that the next step for me, for most people, if they're really inspired to bring this to organizations, is to work on their own vertical development, is to work on, because the more complex you are, the more capacity you have to be helpful to people without imposing something on them. At Teal is the first time when people, so I didn't mention this, but you maybe already have a sense of this. Amber hates orange. Amber thinks orange is greedy. Orange thinks amber is naive. Orange thinks green is a bunch of helpless ninnies, and green thinks orange is greedy and evil and ruining the planet. See where you resonate on that? A particular set of thoughts. Teal starts to see, they all got something. There's value in all parts of what Claire Graves thought of as a spiral. And to have a healthy society, we don't have much magenta purple in our society, the tribal part. And we don't really have too much red part, except for gangs and whatnot. The spectrum of places we have in our society, there's probably about 4 or 5 maybe that are the main part, and that evolves over time. That moves, over time. Several hundred years ago, there wasn't any green, and now there's really quite a bit. So there's an evolutionary progression of us as a species, and an organization, and eventually the organizations that are now, totally centered in orange will dissolve, because Teal organization, the other thing I didn't tell you is when Graves studied the people that were organized at Teal, they kicked everybody else's ass. They produced more stuff, more productive stuff than all the other groups put together. And that's what's going to happen eventually. And that's what you sense, I think, in being drawn to Agile, is that this is going to, kick ass. And it is, but it ain't going to do it in the companies that you're in at the level that you want it to. I don't believe. Your mileage may vary. So I think that's probably a good place to end. Thank you so much. Sure. Yeah.
Any questions? We have a mic over here.
Yeah, I was wondering, again, thinking,
Where are you?
I'm over here.
Oh.
Hello.
Hey.
Between knowing your client and knowing yourself, I'm thinking, well, somebody could be at home and feel well in the green area, or have come to learn how to be in the green area
Yes.
and know it, and the orange area,
Yes.
but that their expertise, what they're really skilled at, their unique contribution fits well in the orange area. Now, how would that work if the client has a lot of green to them? You can operate there, but it's not with your natural strengths. Or should, in that case, if your unique skills are orange-like, stick to orange organizations?
Well, okay, so there's a couple of things. This lets me get into the complexity and nuance of this. So within any, reasonably substantive big organization, there's going to be a substantial amount of orange and green and probably amber. So, you know, you could work with whole teams that are lighting up green or whole teams that are lighting up orange or amber. And in fact, there's some functions that are naturally, so, you know, a control function, a compliance function is naturally amber. That's the thinking of it, that's appropriate to it. And so even if you were really good at amber, let's say, that would be a logical place that you might work, a group you might work with. So you could always find parts of the spiral in any you know, given organization. The issue becomes when you try to scale or when you think about the entirety where it becomes a problem. So finding a niche in any organization, you could probably find that at any level that you tend to be good at. And you know, specifically, like I said, green organizations are much more likely to be in the nonprofit sector because the mindset is more consistent with nonprofit work. Green absolutely needs the orange, you know, success orientation, results orientation. So that could be a very useful thing for a green organization, is to have that. And a healthy one will recognize that they have a need for that. Did that address your question?
Yeah.
Question in the back.
With this notion that the nonprofits are doing better, are you saying that tax law actually favors the orange organizations? Is our rules, tax rules essentially, but rules of our economy favoring this old school organizational model?
Oh, yeah. Well, I think I would say tax rules, certainly basic corporate law favored, it is completely centered in an orange, you know, model of that, because it's actually written into law that corporations exist to benefit shareholders, not customers, not the environment. So it's a green idea with something called the triple bottom line, which is that you have to pay attention to people and the planet and the profits, that all three are important. It's an orange idea that the shareholder is the only person that matters, or the only stakeholder that matters. And that's part of U.S. law. U.S. You know, you can't, a board can't, you know, actually act, or they entail risk if they act in another way than that.
So does U.S. law need to evolve to accommodate the evolution of?
Yeah, I think that would be a really good idea. Well, it's, a guy named Steve Denning, that some of you may know, who wrote a book called Radical Management. He's a business thinker, writes for Forbes, and wrote a book on leadership and storytelling. Discovered the Agile world a number of years ago and wrote a really great book called Radical Management. And in his column in Forbes, he frequently writes about, you know, that the idea that organizations exist only for shareholders is the dumbest idea in the world. And it really is a very regressive idea because, you know, our society has evolved, and if you think about all four quadrants, they don't evolve equally. They evolve, you know, the right-hand quadrants, the technology-oriented, social media stuff has evolved so much more rapidly. That's what the demand for Agile software development is because it's responsive to the rise of complexity in those quadrants. But there's not the left-hand side to match them. So we haven't evolved our leadership and we haven't evolved our culture in a way that's a match for those, you know, I mean, there's no question that Agile development makes more sense in its space. That's where the arguments are very persuasive, and that's where people buy into them. But then they don't have the capacity on the left-hand side, if that makes sense, to meet them, to sustain them, essentially. I'm not sure if that addressed your question.
I'm not sure either.
But it was a good ride. Sure.
My question, when you categorize people or organizations, how static or dynamic can that be? For example, I was looking at that thinking, well, sometimes I feel, you know, oh, the green and teal, and there's other
Yeah,
times when I want to take a hammer and kill somebody,
Sure.
and quite red.
Right, yeah.
So I'm wondering, in
Yeah.
different, if context changes, would you actually change, with the same
It-
team, with the same organization, you'd have to treat it differently?
We talk about it as a meme stack. A meme is a chaos attractor, like a style or something, and each of the levels is like a collection of memes. And so we talk about having a meme stack that's lit up. So imagine like a diagram that has, you know, red at the bottom and amber and then orange and then green and then teal. So for any given person, no person is going to have just one level lit up. Everybody's going to have multiple levels lit up. So for me, for instance, driving is a red activity. It's a jungle out there.
You haven't seen Mario?
Yeah. And my wife hates it when I drive and I go red. So everybody's got some place. Actually, a lot of people, sports is a place where they can light up red.
So do you see this for organizations though, because it's
Sure.
shifting, so even if you learn this method, you also still have to be smart enough to see they might change, maybe dynamic.
Well, less that than like very few people in our, you know, even if an organization is centered at orange, they still always light up green around political correctness and diversity and stuff. I mean, that's become just part of the whole way that our society is shaped. I mean, it's just not cool to, you know, to harass people or, you know, whatever. That's just not okay, right? The motivation for that, though, like one of my the things I like to say in this regard is that, you know, gay rights. Most companies now support gay, not all obviously, but most support gay rights. But orange companies do that not really from a sense of social justice, but from a, that's a good demographic. We gotta go after that. Those people spend money. That's an orange way of thinking about a green social issue. So, you know, like if you were looking at probably in terms of, if you were like measuring it, you know, a center of gravity means you're about 50% in one level. And that means you're 25% in the one above and 25% in the one below. And so you've got quite a range in a given person, and certainly a company potentially has a bigger range.
Do you get a center shift at all?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure, and some organizations are clearly moving. I'm more talking about that as a glacial pace, particularly compared to what most of us want. And you know, an orange organization is not going to get to teal in your lifetime. Just don't believe that. But an orange organization that's already in an orange-green transition could move up to green.
You're saying they won't flip by context. If the context suddenly changes, different environment, or like say you just had an oil well blow up in the Gulf or something like that. Will something like that cause the organization to behave differently, or
Yes,
they'll
yes,
stick to their sense of
absolutely.
color?
No, absolutely. So a crisis can downshift us. So, you know, think about if we had a environmental collapse, if the world economy really utterly collapsed, we'd all be going back to beige, to survivalist, you know, to survive, you know, be like Mad Max, and you know.
We go down that route.
Yeah. Well, yeah, more often. You can well, and the other thing is that people that are in a kind of open, growing state like to be managed by the level above. So people actually want to be paced in that sense. People that are in a growing state, which is they're definitely not everybody, but it's, you know, plenty of people.
Thank you very much, Michael.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.